Hi there. It's time to look at the three crypto originals: Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Bitcoin Cash. If you're new to my session, I'll cover the Wyckoff stage of each of these projects, potential price trend change, as well as key price levels. These are education content only, not financial advice. To help you avoid FOMO and panic, the newsletter that I publish every week is now available on Substack at Asset Lens. Let's dive into the charts of Bitcoin. This is the weekly chart of Bitcoin, and no surprise, as we previously covered, basically Bitcoin was moving between the lower boundary or the support line of the uptrend, this uptrend box over here, and the green key level of 68,000. When we get to the daily chart, we will see clearer what's going on. It tested briefly above the green key level. However, it continues to stay right below. The volume has been declining gradually, so people are waiting for news. There are a bunch of economic data coming out the coming week from the US, so that may change how Bitcoin would move. And of course, the war in Iran is dragging on and developing in a way that wasn't expected in the beginning, at least in late March. So it really depends on how these things evolve. Back to the chart here. You can say this looks like a bear flag, meaning the price may continue to go slightly higher and then eventually break below the flag, like this one over here. If you are new to my session, I have compared this to the 2021 basically distribution cycle back then. The similarity here is that there was one leg, like you can say relief rally, and then a mini sideways or slightly upward movement before it retraced back to the selling climax, and eventually the accumulation cycle that lasted from 2022 May-June time all the way to 2023 October. Okay, almost 1.5 years. So the similarity is here. One leg up, like this one on the left, and then eventually we are at this spot right there. So, like many people say, right? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So as of this moment, we see the similarity here. But the duration, how long it has been staying along these relief rallies or like intermediate pulses along the drop is different, okay? Last time, the first round was way longer than what we had back in November to January. And this time, the second leg, we are way longer compared to the last one. So it is understandable because the environment is completely different now compared to 2022. Okay? Let's dive into the daily chart now. Last week, we talked about this April 28th date where the support line of the uptrend or the bear flag is crossing the 68K. I shared that since the price dropped below the green key level the Friday before, I said, okay, the green key level would be a major resistance. And the entire week, just briefly for a day, or you can include the other one, 2 days in total, they managed to close slightly above the green line, but inevitably it dropped back 2 days ago. If you look at the white color volume bars, especially today and yesterday, of course you can say because this weekend the volume is lower, that can be another reason as well, just that the bulls aren't very committed. Because if you look at the candlestick yesterday, when the price comes back to challenge the support right over here, the second time in a week, okay, after last Sunday, the volume was actually quite low. Okay, if both the bulls and the bears were committed, the volume wouldn't be lower than what happened in the prior days. So that's another sign that's telling us, okay, people probably waiting for these numbers, the economic numbers from the US to come out, as well as how the war is going to develop. All right? If you ask, do we really have to wait till like 28th, 29th of April before we get an answer whether the price is still going along this uptrend, or is it going to get rejected by the green near this point and then drop to the 63K again? It has tested it multiple times in the past 2 months around February, because we're in April now, so it's like 2 months ago, and even the very last day, depending on which part of the world you are. For me, it's end of February. For some of you, it may be 1st of March that tested this 63K. There is an indication if we draw a short-term downtrend channel. Okay, this helps us gauge whether Bitcoin is going to fall through the support line over here. Okay, instead of waiting till end of April, you see this cross over here, the support of the bigger trend, the resistance or the ceiling of the short-term trend. So it's pointing towards 9th of April in just a few days. What it means is that we can see the price, even today, it can still challenge the green key level without much issue, without breaking the ceiling of this trend, right? However, when we get to further down the line, like let's say tomorrow, it's very marginal. It can touch it, can still test it without going past the ceiling too much. But when we get closer and closer to April 9th, this gap, assuming the price is still staying within this wedge, okay? In the end, it has to tell us either one of the options. Either it has to go outside of this short-term downtrend, meaning the short-term downtrend is over, or it follows the downtrend, continue with it, and break outside of this bigger uptrend that started back in early February. And that's when the potential of retesting the 63K support gets higher. All right, just to be clear about this part, we're getting very close to the moment of truth in a few days. If it really breaks this, not only it is going to retest the 63K, but there's a chance that it starts a new downtrend. Okay, so that's the risk for Bitcoin. Obviously, people who are waiting for its price to go up prefers this more than this, okay? But once it's past the April 9th, assuming it breaks outside of the short-term downtrend, it still has to get past the 68K and eventually this white line over here, or ultimately the 74K, like what it did, what it tested in mid-March. That's the next key resistance before it can go challenge the 80,000. Okay, for the ones, if you're new to my session, these channels, these parallel channels, you can picture them as air hockey table, something like air hockey table. Basically, the price will bounce along 3 lines. The resistance, the support, and the center line. You see some of these just bounces from the center line. All right. The center line doesn't always cut the box in half. Just to remember that. Look at this one. This line is scaled or skewed more towards, aligned more towards the resistance, the ceiling of the channel. All right. So, time for Ethereum. Ethereum, not much surprise. Again, second week, traveling between the this one, the blue key level 1950 and 2135. The blue, from the blue to the purple key level, very narrow range for 2 consecutive weeks. it tried to break the purple, but the bulls were successful and the volume has slightly declined as well. Obviously, for the same macro reasons, so I'm not going to repeat. It's the same for everybody basically, except a few, which in the following sessions when I cover those projects, especially Everett, I'll cover those reasons. But that doesn't mean that's going to last long. It all depends on the macro factors as well. So Ethereum still at the early stage of accumulation. I say before that it may be around the panic over stage. It can basically start the accumulation shakeout. Okay? What it means is that during the accumulation, the whales are going to shake out the paper hands until only diamond hands remain, meaning no people are going to sell anymore. Then the whales know, okay, it's time. And they have accumulated enough. They will let us see a sign of strength. Price may retrace. That's the last time they shake out the paper hands, and then they let the price surge to the next distribution cycle. That's what happened typically in a lot of charts. Assuming these projects are going to continue, okay? It doesn't mean the next distribution cycle will always end up at the same height or creating a new high. It doesn't mean that. It just means people's behavior. The FOMO will still come back as long as crypto is still a thing. And then, when the FOMO passed, basically people have been drawn to somewhere else, or they run out of capital. They're waiting for things to come back. And that's when the whales scoop up a bunch of things during the accumulation, okay? So it's the same. It's a measure of human behavior and psychology. It doesn't mean it is going to repeat exactly the same. Okay, the shapes over here, we see this channel again, right? Ethereum hasn't exited the downtrend that started from August last year. It's still within that downtrend. These dates over here tells us the potential window that the price may get outside of this downtrend, meaning we would get a confirmation whether the downtrend is over by those dates. Obviously, 5th of April is close to impossible now, but we're technically still within that date. So it's close to, not past. So technically speaking, it's not 100% impossible. And then next is April 19th. So assuming the price shoots up to the red key level of 2330, but gets rejected by the ceiling of the downtrend and travels along this triangle. Okay, that's formed between the ceiling of the downtrend and the purple key level of 2135. Then it is going to point to the 19th of April. Again, two options: break outside of the downtrend, break below the support, the purple line in that case, and continue. However, if it travels sideways, like what it did since the beginning of February, okay, the 5th and 6th of February, except 4 days on, these 3 candles over here, it's 1 week in total within the entire 2 months. Only a week it was above the purple line. So if it continues sideways between the blue key level of 1950 and 2135, it will eventually get to the point where the ceiling crosses the blue key level again. And that's getting close to beginning of May. So if that happens, the second window comes in. Again, the same decision has to be made. But that by that time, it's going to have to break below this blue key level of 1950. From a Wyckoff perspective, even if the panic over stage has arrived, the selling climax has arrived, it can still, the price can still go for a deeper test. Okay, look at what happened over here. Not the last cycle, but the cycle here. back in 2018. So supposedly this is somewhere between or around the selling climax, and the subsequent test can return to that level or even lower in some other projects if you have been following my session. So the test doesn't mean it is going to end up higher than where the selling climax was. So that's, be careful right over here. If it ever breaks below 1950, it doesn't mean it's going to end at 1800 like what it did back in February. It can go lower. And from a macro or a big picture perspective, you see I have this box over here. Okay? This box basically combined with the white box, the big white box, are my long-term measurement. I call that long-term playground for Ethereum. Okay? It has one additional box over here. So if the yellow, consider it's a hypothesis, okay? Hypothesis 1 and hypothesis 2. If hypothesis 1, the yellow box is true, even if the price drop, it should hold, based on the timing we are along the chart, it should hold somewhere above the yellow key level 1550. Or if it goes a few weeks later, when we get into June, it should stay, not even June basically, it's technically now. If it drops, it can't really touch the 1550. It can touch the 1600 line, this white dash line over here, because technically it's still within the hypothesis 1 bottom, okay? It's still above that. But when you get into late June, that starts to diminish. So that's assuming hypothesis 1 is right. Meaning, Ethereum, similar to Bitcoin, its base price is getting higher and higher along with time. You call that inflation factor or whatever name you give it, or because of money printing, okay? The white box, hypothesis 2, is that Ethereum, much like a lot of other altcoins, stay flat. Its bottom, okay, may go back to the previous low, like what it did back in the 2000, okay, around COVID period. That's, well, obviously, no supporters for Ethereum want to see hypothesis 2 proven true, okay? But we need to track. Not until this drop happens and finishes, bottoms out, not until then, we wouldn't know which hypothesis is correct, okay? Now, just quickly check. I've talked about these states, so we're fine to go ahead with Bitcoin Cash. Here, but Bitcoin Cash still, working very hard, staying within the distribution cycle. Last time I already shared that Bitcoin Cash has only got an upthrust, much like Bitcoin. Okay, upthrust after the initial FOMO. There wasn't upthrust after distribution yet for both. So technically speaking, from a Wyckoff method perspective, the chance of it, bouncing from this point is still there, even though the chance may be slim. Okay, if it drags on long enough and liquidity starts to come back and people starts to get risk on, it's not a must for it to go into another accumulation cycle before it shoots back up. Okay, that's only an assumption that a lot of good factors line up before money gets sucked out from Bitcoin Cash. All right, so it's not a must. It's just a possibility that we are not eliminating when we look at the chart and the methods you have chosen. Okay, if it does continue to drop into the panic sell and eventually reaches the panic over stage, like what it did back in the beginning of 2025, we're not talking about very long time ago. It was just last year, beginning of last year, and starts a round of quick accumulation, then that's what we are trying to observe for Bitcoin Cash. From a volume perspective, it's the same story, but the decline is more obvious for Bitcoin Cash. It basically started somewhere near end of January. Okay, you see from this level, drop to this level. It went up for 2 weeks, but generally, it has been declining for 3 or 3.5 months already. Okay, so here, back to this chart. While the tendency getting into accumulation seems higher, look at these wicks from the top, selling the bears, pushing the price down, trying to push it back to retest the 427 orange key level, like what it did, back in January, end of Feb. Now it is seemingly coming back to retest this 427 orange line. If we look at this, I've talked about this bear flag or the parallel channel, the short-term channel within this bigger channel. Okay? We're measuring this to see whether it is going to continue. But unfortunately, we get a definite answer 2 days ago. The price fell through the support. So these days, unless it magically bounced back to this wedge, otherwise we can consider them, obviously the one that passed won't be possible. But the other two, April 6th, April 13th, that's not going to happen. Not even this, until the point it travels back to this line. And looking at what is going on, it's time to draw another channel box. Again, you see these candles retesting this downtrend support. We've got these touching the ceiling. So assuming that it is traveling along this air hockey table, okay, bouncing between the boundaries, you have a date over here that's pointing towards 20th of April. All right. So that assumes if the price continues to travel along this way, and there is really such a ceiling over here, when it comes to challenge the 427, like we talked about just now, the orange line, then it will enter this triangle, this wedge. And that's the window it has to confirm. Okay, it's like going to continue travel down towards the red key level 379, or is going to break this short-term downtrend and once again challenge the ceiling and stays above the orange key level, which will give us another date. That's pointing, let's use this one instead. That's pointing towards the 29th of April. Okay, this tip over here. All right, so it'll be interesting to see whether Bitcoin Cash is really coming down or towards the accumulation range. Last time in 2025, the accumulation range was between 270 all the way to 379 or 380 if you want to make it simple. And very similarly, during summer all the way into November 2024, it was around a similar range. Okay, would Bitcoin Cash do it once again, coming back to this range? We'll soon find out. We're getting close to the moment of decision. Okay, remember those dates coming in mid-late April. If you're interested to access these sessions 2 days earlier, join the other members now. And remember, the dashboards and newsletter that avoid FOMO and panic, help you understand the market better, is available on Substack at SLLens. See you in other sessions. Ciao.